Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Go ahead and get settled in because today we're stepping straight into the shadows. We're going to be unpacking a truly grim, dark, gothic parable about ambition, human weakness, and the absolutely brutal trade off between instant results and long term discipline. It's the kind of story that forces us to take a hard look at our own reflections and ask ourselves what we are actually willing to sacrifice for greatness. I want you to just sit with this provocation for a second as we get started. What could possibly be more dangerous than failing to achieve your dreams? To really answer that, we have to plunge right into the shifting, misty shadows of a realm known as the Empyrean. Just imagine a place where the freezing mists of Niflheim pool around your feet, literally like spilled ink. Because that is exactly where our story begins. Picture this. We're in the High Hall of the Empyrean. The Shadow Walker is leaning casually against the High Master's throne of carved ash, and in his clawed hand, he's holding up a pale silvered glass. He's initiating this grand cosmic wager, hissing with a real flicker of irony about a scholar who burned with a star's fire. But see, the Shadow Walker isn't interested in some calculated intellectual desperation that wants to swallow the sun. No, he wants the High Master to witness a much more insidious hunger. He wants to show him the quiet rot of a soul that is just completely desperate to escape the weight of the present. Okay, let's hit pause on the parable for just a second to do a quick structural analysis, right? Historically, we tend to see two very divergent types of ambition in these kinds of tales. On one hand, you've got the apprentice, who is driven by micro-level ambition. His big error is just foolish ignorance. He basically just wants to get out of doing a minor daily chore, and when everything inevitably goes wrong, he has to be rescued by his master. Then, on the totally opposite extreme, you have Faust. His ambition is macro-level, born out of this deep, calculated intellectual desperation. He's trying to transcend mortal existence itself, which requires this agonizing lifetime of internal struggle. But our story today, it introduces a fascinating third variable. Because down below the Empyrean, we find our third archetype, Friedrich. He's sitting in this dark library, thick with the smell of ancient dust and decaying parchment, completely surrounded by the wreckage of his past failures. And Friedrich is just exhausted. He is deeply weary of the slow path of deep expertise and discipline. He's tired of the long, slow labor of the soul. And it's precisely in this moment of extreme vulnerability, sitting right there in the ruins of his active striving, that the Shadow Walker appears in the corner of his room, offering him a silent reflection. Now, here is where the nature of the bargain gets really interesting. The Shadow Walker offers Friedrich the mirror that only showed tomorrow. Notice that there's no flesh and wine here, no violent macro-level ambition like we see with Faust. Friedrich's bargain is so much quieter, and honestly, way more insidious. It offers him a comfortable fantasy. This mirror shows Friedrich a version of himself that has already achieved total mastery. He's already found infinite understanding. He's already reached salvation. It is literally the ultimate shortcut through magic. It allows him to just bask in his future glory while completely bypassing all the mundane labor of his actual day-to-day life. And you can just watch how this tragic decay builds up over time. Because Friedrich is holding on to this comfortable fantasy, a quiet rot sets in. For years, he literally does nothing but gaze into that silvered surface. All his active striving entirely ceases. He drops the quill. He never moves the stone. I mean, why would he? In the mirror, the work is already done. But this is a vicious double-edged sword. While his mind gets to hold on to the image of being a god, his passive surrender to the illusion of short-term gratification causes his physical reality to just rot. It turns into a hollow cavern of neglected todays. And then, of course, the inevitable happens. The unearned power of this artifact simply cannot sustain the crushing weight of all those wasted years. Friedrich is so drawn to the glorious, fully realized face of the master he sees in the glass that he actually reaches out to touch it. And in that very moment, the mirror cracks. The entire comfortable fantasy just shatters into 1,000 jagged shards. And what exactly does Friedrich see? Well, he certainly doesn't see tomorrow anymore. In each and every fragment, he sees all the todays he had so carelessly traded away. He looks around his library and finally registers the cinerous remains of his potential. The ink is completely dried up in the pot. The books are literally rotting on the shelf. And when he finally looks down, he sees his own hands, now withered and trembling from an entire lifetime of passive surrender to complacency. So the absolute core of all this comes down to one word: hubris. But specifically, hubris in the context of time. Friedrich's downfall wasn't that he desired greatness. His blinding pride was ignoring the fundamental reality that time is literally the only vessel for mastery. Because he decided to skip the daily grind just so he could live in the fantasy of the finish line, he was left with absolutely no vessel left to act upon his monumental dreams. He had sacrificed the very mechanism of achievement. It's right then, in the freezing gloom of that ruined library, that the master sorcerer appears. And he doesn't arrive with wrath or anger, but with a kind of stern mercy. He delivers this heavy, hierarchical wisdom to the ruined scholar, asking him, what good is the map of tomorrow if the cartographer has burned away all his yesterdays? The master is teaching Friedrich, and by extension all of us, that purpose becomes completely unmoored the second it is not anchored in the labor of the now. And that brings us to the absolutely crucial lesson I want you to take away from today's explainer. I want to turn the Master Sorcerer's challenge directly over to you. We live in a modern culture that is totally obsessed with endless shortcuts, hacks, and instant gratification. So I have to ask, are you staring into your own mirror of tomorrow? Are you burning away your actual yesterdays for some comfortable fantasy? Or is your purpose firmly anchored in the unglamorous, slow labor of the now? As the Master Sorcerer withdraws his magic from the room, a tiny spark of the individual lesson of Faust remains. That understanding that man will inevitably err as long as he strives. But true redemption, that is only found in continuous, active striving toward higher purposes. Up in the high hall, that cosmic wager continues. But down in the ruins of the library, Friedrich, who is now an old man, picks up a single shard of the broken mirror. He stops looking for tomorrow. Instead, he reaches for his quill, beginning the long, slow labor of the day he has finally, actually earned. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When you look at the tools of your own daily labor, do you see a burden you're trying to escape, or the only true magic you will ever possess? Class dismissed.